My boss fired me on a Friday afternoon, and he did it with a smile. Not an angry smile. Not an awkward one. It was the confident smile of a man who believed he was in complete control. He didn't look at me when he spoke. Instead, he stared at his reflection in the glass wall of his office, straightening his tie like he was about to walk into a press conference. Then he slid a thin folder across the desk toward me, slow and casual, as if he were doing me a favor. "We're restructuring," he said. "Your role is no longer necessary." That was it. No warning, no performance review, no conversation. I had worked there for years. Late nights, emergency calls, systems crashing at 3 a.m. That only I knew how to fix. But none of that mattered now. According to him, technology had replaced me. "Automation does what you do faster," he added, leaning back in his chair. "We're cutting unnecessary costs." I didn't argue. That surprised him. Most people beg. They ask questions. They get emotional. I didn't do any of that. I simply nodded, picked up the folder, and thanked him for his time. That confused look on his face lasted less than a second. And then the smile returned. He thought he had just fired a replaceable employee. What he didn't understand was this: I wasn't replaceable. I walked out of the building quietly. No dramatic exit, no angry words. The elevator doors closed, and my reflection stared back at me, calm, focused, already thinking 3 steps ahead. In the parking lot, the sky was gray and heavy. I sat in my car for a moment, listening to the engine hum, letting the silence settle. That's when the truth became very clear. My boss didn't fire a worker, he fired the foundation. Years earlier, before the company grew big, before the fancy offices and corporate speeches, I had built the system that powered everything behind the scenes. Not just software, a core operating brain that connected data, automation, and security into one living network. The company didn't own it. They licensed it. And I still held the patent. Buried deep in my contract was a clause no executive ever bothered to read. A clause that required my weekly authorization for the system to remain fully active. I checked the time on my dashboard Friday. 3:42 p.m. The next system renewal was scheduled for Sunday night at midnight. I started the car, pulled out of the parking lot, and drove home without looking back. My boss believed Monday would be just another workday. He had no idea that Monday was about to become the most expensive lesson of his career. And I didn't need to lift a finger to teach it. Most people think revenge needs action. Hacking, shouting, breaking something on purpose. Mine needed none of that. All it required was silence. The system I had built wasn't just lines of code. It was a living framework, designed to protect itself above all else. When you manage sensitive data at scale, you don't assume safety, you enforce it. Years earlier, when I designed it, I asked myself one question. What happens if the wrong person gains control? The answer became the heart of the system. Every 7 days, it required a secure renewal, a digital handshake that only I could provide. No shortcuts, no overrides. If the system didn't receive that authorization, it assumed a breach and locked itself down automatically. Not to punish anyone, to protect everything. That weekend, my phone reminded me of the renewal schedule like it always did. A soft vibration, a neutral message, no urgency, just a quiet request. Under normal circumstances, I would have handled it in seconds. Scan my fingerprint, enter the code, done. But these weren't normal circumstances anymore. I was no longer an employee. I had been officially terminated. My access badge was disabled. My name removed from internal systems. If I logged in now, it wouldn't be maintenance. It would be unauthorized access. And my former boss had been very clear. Everything must be done by the book. So I followed the book. Perfectly. Saturday passed without incident. I cooked, cleaned, and caught up on sleep I had missed for years. There was a strange peace in doing nothing. For the first time in a long while, the company's problems weren't mine. Sunday evening arrived quietly. At 8:00 p.m., the reminder came again. Authorization required. I stared at the screen for a long time. I felt no anger, no excitement. Just clarity. I set my phone down and made tea. At 11:30 p.m., another reminder appeared. At 11:45 p.m., the final warning. Still, I did nothing. When the clock hit 12:00 a.m., the system made its choice. It interpreted my silence as danger. Security protocols activated. Connections closed. Encryption keys rotated and then sealed. Automated processes lost their permissions. The system didn't crash, it locked itself. I watched the notification appear. Authorization expired. Protective shutdown initiated. That was it. No alarms, no explosions. Just a quiet digital door closing. I turned off my phone, placed it face down on the table, and went to bed. I slept better than I had in years. Because deep down, I knew something important had happened. I had finally stopped holding up a structure that never acknowledged my weight. Monday morning would arrive soon. And when it did, the company would discover a truth too many leaders forget. You can replace people, but you cannot replace ownership. Monday morning arrived without drama. No alarms, no crashes, no warning messages. Just silence. Inside the company's operations floor, screens that normally pulsed with movement stood frozen. Numbers refused to refresh. Status lights blinked once, then stopped. Employees stared at their monitors, waiting for something, anything to happen. Nothing did. At first, managers assumed it was a minor delay. Someone mentioned server lag. Someone else blamed the weekend update. Coffee cups were set down untouched as minutes stretched into uncomfortable stillness. By 8:30 a.m., the phone stopped ringing. Not because clients weren't calling, but because the routing system no longer recognized active permissions. Calls hit dead ends. Automated responses failed to load. Email queues backed up silently. People began to panic. The head of IT rushed from desk to desk, refreshing dashboards that refused to respond. Error messages appeared and vanished too fast to read. One line repeated itself in the system logs. Authorization required. At 9:00 a.m., my former boss walked onto the floor. He expected efficiency. He expected order. He expected proof that firing me had been the right decision. Instead, he walked into a room that felt like a library after a power outage. "What's going on?" he demanded. No one answered right away. They were too busy trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Finally, a junior engineer spoke carefully. "The core system isn't responding. It's locked." My boss laughed. "Locked," he said. "By what?" No one had an answer. Servers were online. Hardware was healthy. Network connections were intact. Everything looked normal except nothing worked. By mid-morning, the damage started spreading. Automated workflows stalled. External partners reported failed handshakes. Transactions didn't fail, they simply never completed. That was worse. By noon, executives were pacing. Meetings were called and canceled. Coffee turned cold. Voices grew sharp. Someone finally pulled the contracts. Legal reviewed them in a quiet conference room, while the rest of the company unraveled. And then the call was made. The system wasn't malfunctioning. It was inactive by design. One sentence changed everything. "The system requires authorization from the patent holder." The room went silent. Someone asked the question no one wanted to hear. "Didn't we fire that person on Friday?" No one answered. Across the city, my phone began to vibrate. Once, twice, 10 times. I watched it from my kitchen counter while I made breakfast. I didn't rush. I didn't smile. I just listened to the steady buzz. The sound of a machine realizing it had removed the wrong part. By late afternoon, the company wasn't losing money anymore. It was bleeding trust. Clients demanded answers. Partners froze operations. And my former boss finally understood the truth he had missed. Nothing was broken. The system was simply waiting. And for the first time, he needed me more than I ever needed him. By late afternoon, the company was no longer pretending. The phones hadn't come back. The systems were still frozen. Clients were demanding answers no one could give. That's when the calls became desperate. At first, they came from numbers I didn't recognize. Then from private lines. Then from the legal department. I let them ring while I finished my meal, washed my dishes, and cleared the table. I wasn't angry, I was calm. When I finally answered, the voice on the other end wasn't my former boss. It was the company's general counsel, speaking carefully, choosing every word like it might explode. "We need to talk," she said. I agreed to meet on one condition, not at the office. An hour later, we sat in a quiet conference room inside a downtown hotel. No logos, no security desks, no power imbalance. My former boss arrived late. He looked different. The confidence was gone, his tie was loose, his face pale. He didn't sit at first. Just hovered, as if unsure whether he was still allowed to take space in the room. "This has gone far enough," he said quickly. Just give us access and we'll sort out your compensation later. I didn't raise my voice. There is no later, I said. I'm not an employee anymore. That sentence changed the room. The board representative leaned forward. The lawyer stopped writing. My former boss finally sat down. I slid a document across the table. This is a licensing agreement, I said. You've been using my system without authorization since midnight. The lawyer scanned the pages. Her hands trembled slightly. This system powers everything, she whispered. Yes, I replied. And right now, you don't have permission to use it. My former boss tried to interrupt. This is extortion, he snapped. No, I said calmly. This is ownership. The board member spoke next. His voice was steady but tight. Every hour this continues. We lose millions. I nodded. Then we're finally speaking the same language. They threatened lawsuits. I reminded them of discovery. They mentioned public relations. I reminded them of audits. Silence returned to the room. Finally, the board member picked up the pen. He signed. And then he turned to my former boss. You didn't raid the contract, he said coldly. You didn't understand the system, and you fired the person holding it together. Security appeared at the door. My former boss protested. His voice echoed down the hallway as he was escorted out, not as a leader, but as a liability. I watched without satisfaction, just closure. The lawyer slid the signed agreement back to me. Whenever you're ready, she said quietly. I opened my laptop. The room was completely silent. No one spoke as I placed my laptop on the table and opened it. The tension was so thick it felt physical, like the air itself was waiting for permission to move again. I rested my hand on the keyboard. For years this moment had been routine, a weekly task, a quiet responsibility no one ever noticed. Now, it carried the weight of an entire company. I scanned my fingerprint. The system recognized me instantly. I entered the authorization code. The same one that had been sitting unused since Sunday night. With a single press of the key, the system accepted my identity and released the lock. Across the table, someone's phone buzzed. Then another. The lawyer glanced down and whispered, "It's updating." Screens across the city began to change. Status lights turned from red to green. Data streams restarted. Processes resumed as if nothing had ever happened. The machine breathed again, but something else had changed forever. The board member exhaled slowly, as if he had been holding his breath for hours. He stood up, straightened his jacket, and extended his hand. "Thank you," he said, not as a formality, but as acknowledgement. I shook his hand, closed my laptop, and stood. I didn't stay for small talk. I didn't go back to my desk to collect personal items. There was no desk anymore, no badge, no title. And I didn't want them back. A week later, the payment cleared. The number on the screen felt unreal, not because of the money, but because of what it represented. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't luck. It was recognition, finally written in a language the company understood. I took time off. Real time. The kind where your phone doesn't buzz every hour and your mind finally goes quiet. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying something invisible. Then I started over. I built a company focused on infrastructure, not headlines. On systems that respected the people who created them. I hired carefully, especially those who had been overlooked elsewhere. As for my former boss, his name faded quickly. Leadership doesn't disappear loudly. It dissolves when people stop believing. Sometimes I think about that Friday afternoon, the smile, the folder, the confidence, and I realize something important. I didn't win because I planned revenge. I won because I built something essential and knew its value when no one else did. If there's one lesson in this story, it's simple. You can fire a person. But if they are the foundation, the moment they walk away, everything else eventually follows. My boss fired me on Friday. By Monday morning, his entire company stopped working, and he had no idea why.